Hey, wonderful. Hello. I'm Geraldine Weiser, Director of Business Development here at Corporate College, and I really want to welcome you to today's session. As we wait for the presentation to start, let's go over just a couple of quick housekeeping items. One, did want to let everyone know that after the presentation, you will receive an email. Along with the email will be a copy of the presentation and also a survey, and we really look forward to your feedback. Um, Second, I would hope that everyone, if you haven't already, would do an audio check and just to make sure your computer or mobile device settings are adjusted correctly and that you have the volume controls at a very pleasant setting. Next, I also wanted to let everybody know you will be muted on today's session. And even though you will be muted, we really look forward to hearing from you. We want to do that through the chat box. Um, if you would please make sure that your chat box is open by selecting the arrow, making sure that box is expanded, the arrow is pointing down, and that you have all panelists selected in the address box, the to address box. That way, Dawn and I will be able to support Polly in making sure that we capture all of your comments and questions. I know Polly will be doing her best to respond to everything as she can during the session, but we'll also have time for Q&A at the end as well. And so we're really looking forward to hearing from you. Now, please also note, besides being muted, in the chat box, you will only be able to see your messages and those sent by us, by the panelists. You won't be able to see anyone else's messages. So again, that's why it's important. We want to make sure that we capture all those for you. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and get started. So, good afternoon, and thank you again for joining Corporate College's webinar series, Live with the Experts. Each session is really geared towards providing you relevant information and tools and topics that support you and really set you up for success. Adjusting to this new norm is really a daily occurrence now, and shifting to this new reality of remote working and learning and living. It's really quite a challenge sometimes. And at Tri-C, we're committed to serving you during this time of rapid change by providing actionable resources to help you and your team succeed and thrive. We really want you to be able to overcome all the various different challenges and achieve both personal and business goals. So we've designed the program to focus on 4 themes, with today's session related to virtual leadership. Other sessions you will see focus on remote working, navigating a transition, even personal health and well-being. And as many of you know, Corporate College is so delighted to have a very distinguished and talented facilitator, bench, and subject matter experts. And today I couldn't be more pleased to introduce our presenter and facilitation specialist, Polly Tonti. Polly was formerly with Charles Schwab, excuse me, Charles Schwab, and developing the team's leadership skills. And we're talking everyone from the frontline managers all the way up to senior leaders. Polly's expertise and strengths and situational leadership really made her a valued contributor to the success of many of Schwab's leaders. Then, while she was at Charter One Bank, Polly led the corporate training development team and established career development roadmaps for various management teams throughout the organization. Sales and career development were really her focus also while she was at LensCrafters. And under her leadership, both sales volumes and customer satisfaction scores increased significantly. Polly's belief is to support an individual and support them in realizing their maximum potential by applying their talents in both personal and professional interactions. So, with that, I just couldn't be more thrilled to present to you today Polly Tonti. Good afternoon, Polly. How are you?
I'm fine, Jerry. How are you?
Wonderful. Thank you.
I'm telling you that that's a lot to have to bite off and meet those expectations, but here we go.
I have no doubt. I've seen you in action, Polly, so I have no doubt.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am thrilled to be here. As Jerry said or mentioned, I am very passionate about people becoming the very best that they can be. And so when Corporate College reached out and talked about the need, the desire to be able to support folks, through this webinar service, as opposed to having one-on-one interaction or, face-to-face interaction with folks. I was just all over it. This information is something that is shall we say, foundational to the role of a leader. If you grasp, understand the information we're going to share with you today, I have no doubt that your role as a leader will just kind of um, inspire others, and you will be, shall we say, just an unbelievable leader. Um, what we have to remember about leadership right off the bat is it doesn't have a whole lot to do with your title. It has everything to do with your mindset. So whatever position you may be in, whether you are that frontline worker, whether you really are, a supervisor, manager, director, or, if you're a member of a group, and especially even in your home, you are in a leadership position. And what that means is that regardless of where you are and what that environment is, you are influencing change. Anytime you influence change in an individual, you are in a leadership role. So whether day to day you have that great awareness of it or not, everything that we do ultimately feeds into what our leadership legacy is going to be. So you ask, well, what is a legacy? Well, a legacy is the sum total of the difference that we make in the lives of other people. It has very little to do with any personal recognition that we get. It has everything to do with the effect, the impact that we have on others. This is so important that I wonder, um, that I actually wonder if you have ever crafted or thought about what your leadership legacy is, or what you want it to be, or are you willing to leave it to chance? Is this something that where you ultimately say, I'm okay if I'm just one of a million leaders, or do you really want to be one in a million leaders? So as we look at our agenda today, you can see we're going to be talking about the role of the leader a little bit. And the content of what we're going to be doing lies in the three principles that I'll be sharing with you. Some very key things that will help you support you in that role of the leader. The other thing is, before we leave, we're going to start drafting a roadmap. We won't finish this today. What I'm going to share with you towards the end of our session is something that I hope you will take on as, shall we say, an assignment, because it really is how we're going to tie all the bits, parts, pieces together. It is also something that doesn't happen overnight, doesn't happen in a 5-minute exercise that you may do. So that's why we're going to give you the foundation of the roadmap, but you will be completing it on your own as we move forward. So here you are. Now you're in charge. You realize that you're in charge, and you start to wonder, well, how's it going? Am I sending a message to them that says, do as I say? It's my way or the highway. Okay. What's your level of stress? How do you know if you're really being successful as a leader? What's the interaction, the relationship that you have with your followers at this point? Well, quite often we think we need to have all the answers and so forth. And what we're finding is this graphic actually points to us to what I would call an old-fashioned way of leadership. Let's turn it around and look at the new school of leadership, so to speak. We chose this graphic because I read a book by a gentleman named Benjamin Zander. And Ben is the conductor of the Boston Philharmonic. And as he walked into that position, it dawned on him one day that as the conductor, he was the guy who had all the final decisions to make, and that he was in this realm of authority. And then he looked out over the orchestra and he thought, no, my role is to realize the significance of each person, how beautifully they play the instrument, that they have, and how his role was really, how do I take this wonderful individual sounds that everyone is making and bring them together so that we are making beautiful music together. There are few things that are as rewarding as leadership. Think about the lives that you touch and the positive changes that you can make in people. There are lots of benefits for other people. Again, it isn't just about us. So leadership is something that's really deeply personal, right? You are going to make mistakes, and that's okay, because the people that we're interacting with, they're human too. They don't always respond in a particular way. It's not the same as when we're working on our laptops and we know that if we push a particular button or a particular key, this is the response we're going to get. What we're finding is that, people are not robots. People are individuals. They have their own thoughts and processes. They may have different perspectives than we do. And to become that significant leader, we have to learn how to think beyond ourselves and include them as well. So let's take a look at what the 3 leadership principles are that we're going to be discussing today. The first one is dare to be a person, not a position. This is let your folks know who you are. You aren't just the title that you have. In fact, our titles simply help define who is responsible for what. But it doesn't make me a better person, a more significant person than the people I actually lead. It just defines what my responsibilities are. So first we'll talk about how to dare to be a person. Then we're going to move on from you, taking the focus off you, and helping you realize that to be a really strong and good and empowered leader, we have to connect with our people. So the second principle here is all about how to connect with people. Then the third one, and the one that I just absolutely love, is are we bold enough to dare to drive the dream? Do we know what we want from leadership? Do we have a very defined focus, a defined purpose? Do we have the tenacity to stick to that? So we're going to spend some significant time as well talking about daring to drive the dream. But let's look first at this dare to be a person, not a position. We talk about or introduce to self-awareness generally as one of the first classes or learnings that we have in leadership training. That's because it's very important that I understand really thoroughly who I am, what my strengths are, where my weaknesses might be. Am I missing a critical skill? How do I interact with people? So I really want to stop and take account of the person that I am. In doing that, we look at what we call the authentic person. Down in the chat box, do me a favor there, and let's just give this chat box a try to make sure everyone is on the same page, so to speak. What are some of the behaviors you would see in a leader that would say to you they are authentic? What are some of those behaviors? Exhibits empathy, caring. I'm loving these. They admit mistakes. Excellent. Okay, sincerity, good listening skills, compassion, transparent, honest. I'm seeing some really, really good things. So obviously, you guys know and would recognize that authentic person, approachable. Oh, right. I like that, Sharia. That's really nice. Okay, so let's look at what that authentic person is. First of all, the keys, the primary ones we will talk about is this whole idea of self-awareness and what does that mean? As someone mentioned in the chat box, we'll also be looking at transparency. And then the third one, which I don't believe I saw show up, oh, perhaps Erica, I'm going to go with your being sincere here, is the sense of humility. So let's have a look at each one and spend a little time with each one. We are self-aware when we understand exactly and what our own emotional state is, okay? And we know that at any point in time. I know when I'm very happy and excited, but I also understand when I'm being pushed to my limit, when I'm hitting, oh, I got to watch out because I just might explode here with frustration and that sort of thing. The sad part is that according to studies, especially around emotional intelligence, what we find is that only 10 to 15% of people are actually self-aware, that understand what the emotions that they are experiencing are, whether they are appropriate, inappropriate, and how we behave. What we need to do is to manage ourselves, because if we can manage ourselves, then we manage other parts of our lives. Okay? The more self-awareness we have, the greater the understanding people have of us, the easier it is to develop trust with folks, okay? And the greater amount of wisdom people will see that we have as well. So I'm sure that many of you have been exposed to or have read about emotional intelligence. And this idea of self-awareness comes straight from there and is the first key to developing your own self or your own emotional intelligence. Again, self-awareness, fortunately, is something that we can develop, we can nurture. Um, uh, as opposed to our, shall we say, our IQ, which is pretty much set and determined the day that we're born. So when it comes to our intelligence, you can go back to mom and dad and thank them for that. When it comes to self-awareness, that's something that we own and something that we can nurture and cultivate as well. Let's talk a little bit about this idea of transparency. Transparency, again, is a critical piece of being a leader. Unfortunately, what we see sometimes is there is the person we know as in that role as a leader, and then there's the person that walks into the house and kicks off their shoes and sits down and has a beer. Sometimes, unfortunately, those are two different people. If we want to develop our leadership skills, we have to be able to expose ourselves, to be able to let people see who we are as we are. We want them to see the same person at work as they probably would see at home, okay? If we don't, this really starts to confuse people. We want to let people know, where do they stand? Okay, what are your expectations? And when they do well, man, that's when I want to absolutely celebrate, right? And that's when we're going to celebrate as a team, an organization, as a family, all right? I also need to let them know, if you mess up, I have to tell you about that too. And so I'm going to be probably a little more direct and that sort of thing. I have a story I'd like to share with you, and it's about a former president and CEO of Ford, and his name is Alan Mulally. And in this particular year, Ford was looking at a $17 billion loss. So obviously, we don't want to end up our year in the red. And so this was a significant issue. So as Alan steps into place, he implements a system where the business leaders, those folks that report to him, when they meet with him, are actually going to craft what we would call a color-coded chart and bring it to their meeting. The chart would list various projects that they've got, just how the general business flow is flowing in their various departments and that sort of thing. And for each block on their chart, they were to color code it. It was to be green if they were seeing success, all the way up through red, which means, oh, we've got a problem, we're, going down here at failure, whatever. So the first meeting comes, and Alan and his leaders gather, and all of a sudden, Alan notices that all of the charts are showing green, meaning everything is fine, everything is wonderful and perfect, everything is just great. And then you have to pause and say, well, if everything is great, why do we look at potentially losing $17 billion this year? Everything was color-coded green because before Alan came, the culture at Ford said that they would hide problems. All right, transparency was not something that they were comfortable with because their jobs could end up being on the line. There was, however, of course, one leader. His name was Mark Fields. And when Mark presented his chart, it had red in a few places. There was some red due to some production issues that they were having, and there was some personnel issues that they were having, all of which would impact the success and the ability of his department to meet goals. I'm sure that he was very timid as he had to present this, and he was the only one that had red on his chart. However, as he went through it, Alan stood up and he actually applauded. He started clapping. And the other managers kind of sat there and they were taken aback and wondering, oh my gosh, what does this mean? Okay. And what Alan was trying to share with them, that when we have those failures, what we really have is an opportunity for growth. Okay? And his philosophy was that as long as you are transparent with me, your honesty will always be rewarded. Your job will be safe. In other words, we know that we're going to mess up. We know that the people we are interacting with, that we're leading with, they may mess up sometimes as well. In fact, what happens is transparency can lead sometimes to us being vulnerable. Do we have the courage to say, I don't know? Do we have the courage to say, I don't know how? I don't agree with. I don't understand why we're doing. A great leader will act upon that vulnerability, okay, and let us know that there is an opportunity for growth here through this area of transparency. When we're vulnerable, it leads to our next key here to being authentic, and that's having this high trait of humility. Okay, it's one trait that we tend to often overlook, and yet when someone is humble, you're going to see that there is a much higher level of increased engagement. Job performance is going to be higher as well. So you're probably wondering, so what does this mean? And how do I show my humility? All right. First of all, be humble enough to listen to other people's opinions. We have our own perspectives, but our perspectives tend to put blinders on us. And what we want to do is listen to other people's opinions so that we're seeing things as a whole and not just a part. We want to tend to other people's needs. It isn't about us. It isn't about having the corner office with the windows and the coolest furniture and great paintings and so forth in our office. It's about the needs that other people have. Do our people have the resources that they need to actually do the job that we expect them to do? So one aspect of humility is to tend to their needs, to make sure that they have that information. What about if they have some personal issue at home? I can only imagine nowadays with everyone working from home, all of the needs that we have that were so much when life was so much more simplified when we were in the office. Third thing might be also we can demonstrate humility by admitting our mistakes. We are not perfect, right? But folks really can tune into us and join with us when we say, you know what, guys, I made a mistake. I was wrong here. I made the wrong decision. They're still going to be much more supportive of you and much more understanding if you admit those mistakes, which is so much better than having them talk about you at the water cooler. All of this leads to what would be really significant, okay? Humility may not come easy to all of us. So one of the things that you can do is actually keep a journal. And at the end of every day, start writing down what are the things that went well? What were the things that weren't so wonderful? Okay, and by chronicling all of this, you start to think about, okay, how could I have handled that better? If I had a do-over, what would I have done differently? And in doing that, creating that journal, you will find that little by little, your degree, your level of humility will probably increase. So I'm wondering if down in the chat box, um, if you would mention, how do you demonstrate being authentic? How would folks that you lead know that you are being authentic? If you just kind of put that down in the chat box. I like that. Admitting when I make mistakes, listen, reiterate. Okay, what's been communicated? Ooh, look at this great one here. Listen without judgment, ask for help. Um, these are absolutely wonderful things. Ask for other people's perspectives. Okay, guys, I think you have a really strong grasp around what this authentic person does. There's one additional thing that an authentic person is going to need, and that is this idea of getting feedback from one another. Okay, I live in my own little bubble, and I think that I'm pretty wonderful. But you know what? Others may have a difference of opinion. So I want to reach out to them and ask for feedback. The first thing I want to do here is to make sure that I am receptive. If I'm having a bad day, that's probably not a great day for asking for feedback. I have to be ready and open with that. When somebody does provide me with feedback, I don't want to be selective with it. I want to listen to everything they have to say. There may be highs, there may be lows, and all of that sort of thing. If this person is giving me feedback, they may be a little hesitant as to how I'm going to respond. So as it says here, I want to listen for what we call the unspoken message. What are they really trying to share with me? And if I'm not getting it, make sure you ask follow-up questions. We all want to, we need to check in to make sure that we're, level set, that we're on the same page. And there are going to be times when people provide you with feedback that you don't agree with, right? Don't respond emotionally. Take that deep breath, count to 10, all right? And be thankful that they took the time to share what must have been difficult for them as well. After this is over, you want to sit down, you want to think about it and decide what are the pieces that you can learn from. How are you going to take action with the information that you've now been provided? Let's move on here. rather quickly and start to talk about how we connect with people. Connect with people, what we ultimately want to do is show them a sense of empathy. And on behalf of Geraldine and myself, I would like to apologize to you. We have some really great videos that we were going to be playing during this session. However, the videos will play, but you won't be able to hear anything. So I just want to summarize the videos. You'll notice at the bottom of the screen, here are the links to the videos. So when this is over, you will be getting this deck, the PowerPoint deck, and you can go in and watch the videos on your own. This one is by world-renowned leader Brene Brown. And when we're talking about empathy, we're talking about being able to take the perspective of someone else, to look at things from their point of view, to actually become their advocate. So envision yourself, instead of standing across from them, you want to stand next to them, okay? And that way it helps you see what their perspective is. The toughest thing when it comes to empathy is not making any judgments about them, whether they're right or they're wrong. The bottom line here is you don't have to agree with them. You just have to be able to acknowledge where they're coming from. Third point is to recognize the emotion in them and let them know that, what the emotion is. You might be off base. You might think that something is really bothering them, and they may just be concentrating or think about something else. So sometimes if the emotion that we think they're experiencing is wrong, you can be guaranteed that they will put you on the right path. But at least we gave it a try. At least we were letting them know how much that we care, okay? And then we also want to communicate what that emotion is. There are some key points here to empathy I want to share. First of all, there are actually 3 stages. There's this cognitive empathy where we are tuned in, we become aware of the emotions of another person, right? Emotional empathy here is engaging and sharing those emotions with someone, kind of putting your arm around them and letting them know that you understand, okay? And then there's also this idea of compassionate. Being compassionate means recognizing and feeling those emotions that they have and actually doing something about it. How do you comfort them? How do you celebrate with them? For instance, nowadays, with our whole COVID um, uh, situation that we've got, doctors and people working in hospitals are very tuned into one another. In fact, the other day I saw a situation where a doctor was realizing how stressed his staff was. So he gathered them together just for a few minutes, okay? And he did some stretching exercises with them. And the stretching exercises, as he was doing them, led to them becoming a little silly, so to speak. All right. And they ended up actually laughing. What he was doing was reducing the level of stress. He could see that they were stressed. He knew that they needed some help. And so he was very empathetic with them. When we use empathy, we're actually building those connections, okay? And those are the kind of connections that become the building blocks that lead us to this idea of trust. Again, we have another video here by a gentleman I'm sure you recognize, Simon Sinek, okay? And this is, again, just a brief video about how we build trust. And I'd like to share with you some of his thoughts. He starts off by saying that trust is the result of something. It's not formed overnight. He said it's similar to when you go out on one date with someone, you don't decide you're going to marry them, all right? It's just that first step. He gives us a definition of love where he says, give someone the power to destroy you and know that they won't use that power And that's when you know that there is love. Simon lets us know that trust is really deep love. He says it builds from this idea of taking risks with someone, sharing something that might be very personal with them, all knowing that if you turn your back on them, they aren't going to stab you. Okay. Trust is all about feeling safe with someone, but it's a two-way street. They need to feel safe with you. So it's not one-sided. It's this kind of dance that we go through, right? And trust actually emerges because we feel safe with one another. It's going to evolve and it's going to take time. Again, it's not a one and done kind of situation. To develop trust, we have to demonstrate to folks that we are able, right? Meaning that we can do it. You and I together, we can do it. We have to be believable. Have our best interest, have folks' best interest at heart. Needing again to feel connection, and here we go back to this idea of emotional intelligence. We want to be able to show care and compassion to one another. And last but not least, we have to be dependable. Do we do what we say we're going to do? With that in mind, okay, we want to look at ways to build trust. First of all, you have to extend yourself and start this process by demonstrating trust in others. We go back to our discussion about being transparent. We have mentioned in the past this great need to communicate. Over communicating will actually build trust. Making sure that anything that we challenge our folks to do or set goals with, that they have the resources that they need, that we're giving them feedback and we are receiving feedback, that whatever problems that might face us, we're ready to tackle those challenges and deal with them right away. We aren't going to postpone or put them off. The bottom line is we need to lead by example. The next way that you can connect with people has to do with this essence of networking. As you can see on the screen here, it says proactively forming key business relationships for the purpose of exchanging useful information that helps you do your job is what networking is all about. Sometimes it's a very awkward, position that we find ourselves in. I know for myself, I get nervous the first time I have to meet someone, whether I'm looking forward to it or not. It's what I call crossing the threshold. Crossing the threshold is very difficult. And then probably 20, 30 seconds in, you're very comfortable, whatever. But taking those first steps into networking can be quite challenging. So here's what a thought from Helen Keller I'd like to share with you. She says, alone we can do so little, but together we can do so much more. Again, I go in and when I start my networking, this is what I know. And then as I increase my network and so forth, and it goes on, I know, I understand, my perspective changes, it grows. I become a much more thoughtful leader, okay, than I used to. Here are some techniques that you can use to start your networking, to develop that. First of all, start with 10, which means who would be 10 people that you would like to reach out to? Make a list. That's your starting point right there with them, okay? Leverage the power of those networkers. You know, for every person that you meet that you haven't had a connection with before, you may find out that you either have people in common or that they can introduce you to people who could be very beneficial in your life, helping you accomplish things. All right, so leverage the power of those networkers. We talk about taking 5 as often as you can, and that means connecting with people, hopefully in person, but nowadays probably through a Zoom or a call or something along those lines, and just give them some support or something. For instance, you may know that one of your colleagues is actually has a presentation to do, and so you might check in with them and say, ask, how are you coming? Can I help? Would you like me to review it? Those are some good ways to build that sense of network. We also want to make sure that we are congratulating folks whenever that's appropriate. Obviously, just a promotion where we normally think about that. We can also think congratulate someone because it's their birthday. Well, how about just on a work anniversary? They've completed or they've been employed at your location for maybe 5 years or something. That's really something to congratulate. So make sure that you're putting yourself out there as well. Right? Thing is that this idea of networking, as critical as it is, often becomes something that, because of timing, we kind of put off and put off. Well, folks, make sure you're putting your networking on your calendar. Make time for that networking, all right? That's where you're going to grow in your knowledge, grow your perspective, grow your support system, all right? So networking is very critical when it comes to connecting with folks. All of this is wonderful stuff, okay? But how do you know that you're doing what you're really meant to do? So in the chat box, would you just write yes or maybe raise your hand? All right. Have you ever crafted a mission statement, a contribution statement that helps focus your life? So if you would just kind of say yes or no. Okay, Eric has. Good. Gina, Sarah, Megan, oh, of course. All right, Sarah, I'm getting lots of yeses, just a few no's. Okay. Um, this is just absolutely is what helps us focus our lives and makes us more successful. So let's take a look at what is this contribution statement? Okay, what does it mean? Well, the contribution statement that we're going to talk about now, it kind of synthesizes who you are. You've got many talents in life, but it says, okay, here are my top talents. And here are the ones that I really want to focus on because they're dearest to me. They're where I build my confidence. They're where I can give back to other people. They help keep you focused. You will have times when it's easily to be distracted. I know we're all there at different points in time, and we think about things that we'd like to do versus things that we should do. So when I go back and I read my contribution statement, it helps me stay focused on the things that I really want to do. It also helps me in the decision-making process. Is this something I should tackle? Is this something I should volunteer for? Is there someone who may be able to tackle this situation or accomplish this goal better than I could? So it helps me recognize who I am, what my strengths are, and are they appropriate in a particular situation, or are they just going to derail me? So it helps in our decision-making process. Bottom line, it holds us accountable. I can help stay focused on what I say I'm going to do. I can do it to the best of my abilities. I will feel comfortable with all that I'm doing. Here are some sample contribution statements I want to run by you real quickly. In the chat box, if you would write down who you think this represents, whose contribution statement is this? The first one says, I am a missionary of charity for all of the poor, sick, orphaned, and dying. Who do you think that is? Mother Teresa. Okay, we got it right there. It definitely is Mother Teresa. All right, try this one. I will lead at the intersection of art and technology. Who might that be? Okay, we've got Stephen Jobs right there. All right, very good. And the last one, I've decided to stick with love because hate is too great a burden to bear. And there we go. Okay, Martin Luther King, thank you very much for playing. So you can see that even not knowing these people intimately, knowing that what their lives are, uh, they were actually represented by what we would call their contribution statement. I've got a video here, um, and as we look at this, this is probably the one video, if you take nothing away or you don't have enough time, please take the time to watch this video, especially when you start to think about who you are as a leader, who you want to be, what do you want people to think of you as a leader, right? This is a video, it's called What Kind of World Do You Want? Do me a favor and close your eyes, and I'm going to read some of the statements that come across here. And I just want you to think about um, what this means to you. How would the answering these questions help you become a stronger leader? How would it drive who you want to be? So please just close your eyes. We are all leaders, but who do we lead? You lead in your organization, group, or even at home. Do you realize the power you have to influence the lives of those around you? The ability to inspire growth in others. And yet, do you ever wonder what your purpose in life is? What is it that you believe in? The greatest crime in the world is not developing our potential. When you do what you do best, you are not only helping yourself, but you're helping the world. When we get caught up in the busyness of the world, we lose connection with one another and with ourselves. What is it that you want to accomplish? Do you want to be a person who makes a difference? Someone who adds values to those you meet? Just remember that time passes quickly, so don't wait. It's time to start thinking about it. What kind of legacy do you want to leave? Be the leader who inspires growth in others. Okay, you can open your eyes. I hope that made you think a little bit about the person that you want to be and helps set some measurements for whether or not you actually are that person. Again, highly recommend, please go back and watch this particular video. One of the things that we talked about is this whole idea of a contribution statement. Well, it seems a bit cumbersome. It's actually not, right? There are 3 steps to it. First, we want to take time to stop and think about our past. And let's look at something, or maybe there are multiple things where we were very successful. And ask ourselves, okay, so what was it that you did that caused a difference? What was the impact on others? What was the difference that you made? How did you do it? What were some of the strengths, some of the talents that you have that showed up while you were doing this? So you're at one point, just take time to think about all the success that you've had in the past. And it doesn't have to be work related. It is both in your professional life and your personal life. All of those play into who you are as a leader. The next step is to dream. Now, instead of looking back, let's look forward and let's imagine, what do we want people to say about us? What do we want people to remember about us? So think about what life will be like about 20 years into the future. What are some of those things that you can do? How are you going to make them come together? What resources may you need? Let's start doing a lot of exploring about ourselves and what we want to do. And then again, the final step is actually crafting the statement itself, where we look at our past and we look at the future and we combine them until we see a pattern that leads throughout our whole life. I'd love to share with you. I went through this process several years ago, and it actually took me about a month to go through because it's something you want to do and then step back from. And so here I would like to share with you, this is my personal contribution statement. I feel that I am like a portrait artist who begins with a sketch, adding layers of colorful attributes and qualities, revealing the unique and vibrant inner beauty of each individual as they confidently value the irreplaceable person that they are. This is what a month of soul searching has brought to me. This actually helps me when I'm trying to decide, do I start down, a different path, or I'm sidetracked into what I call a rabbit hole or whatever. I keep this Post-it so that I can read it and stay focused. It helps me make decisions, and it helps me realize how I impact others. It brings me great joy. I'm thrilled to be able to share this with you and so I'm hoping that each of you will go through the same process that we outlined and develop who are you? Who is that person? Think about who you are and what you want to accomplish. All of this information was actually resourced through these two books, which again, I highly recommend that you read. The first one is called Your Leadership Legacy. Note that it is written by Marta Brooks and Julie Stark. They are actually folks that I worked with when I was employed at LensCrafters while I was an associate there. Marta is probably one of the best presenters I have ever experienced, and Julie is a courseware designer. And between the two of them, along with Sarah's help, they crafted this delicious book. One that's just, as you know, Ken Blanchard has a story and it's a quick and easy read. The other book here called Your First Leadership Job. Again, both books are, by the way, available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, et cetera, et cetera. This one helps you through that challenge of being in your first leadership position and gives you some really good suggestions and examples of how to set a good foundation for your leadership life and that future that you might lead. I'd like to give you a time. I see that our time is short here, but I'm wondering, Jerry, were there any questions that may have popped up that we can address now? Or folks, if you have any questions or comments that you would like to leave in the chat box, I would love to be able to address those for you.
So Polly, there was a question, and as you were talking about building out your network and how critically important that is, there are some challenges now with doing that in this whole virtual setting. So do you have any recommendations? I know there are a lot of meetup groups that are now converting over to virtual, but what would you recommend?
Actually, I would go back at this point and start with that top 10, who are the people that I want to meet with, and start with those folks, because on that list of people, there will be folks that you're a little more comfortable with. All right. Mm-hmm. So meet up with them. And in that conversation, one of the things you may want to point out is there someone that they know that they think you ought to connect with? Or is there someone that you know that they ought to connect with? And in doing so, You might schedule a second, meetup or whatever. So it
Mhm.
becomes the two of you and maybe a third or a fourth person. So even online, we can build those relationships. And as we build those relationships, then we can take them into one-off situations and start to build that network from there as well. Great question.
Perfect. 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 And another one is, and Polly, being a leader doesn't necessarily mean you have a title as leader. There's a lot of leaders in organizations that don't have any title that indicates that. So we have one person, asking a very relevant question to that. How do you lead peers effectively?
First of all, the same as you would as if you were titled. Everything we talked about today has to do with just leadership, okay, and being genuine and being authentic. It's the kind of person I think we all want to be anyway. And when we demonstrate, those different talents and abilities, then very naturally, people start tuning into you. When you reach out and, for instance, a story I'd like to share with you. At one point in my career, I was a director of volunteer services at a hospital. And as one weekly director meeting that I was attending, one of the other directors mentioned my volunteers and called them the Pink Ladies because they all wore pink jackets.
Mm.
I had to stop him there and remind him that people have names, and that it isn't just their job. It isn't that they just wear pink. There was a real person behind there. So we had that discussion, and bottom line is the directors agreed to get to know the names of my volunteers, which I thought was thrilling. Immediately after that meeting, one of my fellow directors and I went to lunch in the cafeteria. And as she started through the line, I said to her, Debbie, I'm going to order whatever you order. She goes through the line and ordered her lunch. I ordered the same thing. Difference was, I would say to someone, um, you know, oh, I love the color of the sweater that you're wearing, or, how are the kids doing? There was just some personal note. All right. When we got to the end of the line, we both paid the same amount for our lunch, but I had probably a quarter to a third more food on my plate than Debbie did. All right. It's all about acknowledging people and starting to build those relationships. And it can be real tiny steps. And they then realize the power that you have, okay, and the significance, and you can easily lead them as a result.
That was wonderful. Yes. I mean, it's amazing, peers, colleagues, how you can really impact them by, really demonstrating the great leadership skills. Um,
Mhm.
so that was wonderful. Thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
Perfect. And I think we've answered recent questions, just going back a little bit too. Um, There was a question earlier. So, one of the things a great leader also has to do is maybe recover from, you were talking earlier about, the transparency and admitting mistakes. What are some suggestions, or what are some experiences that you've had working with leaders who've had to now come back and say, hey, this didn't go the way I thought it was going to, and having those conversations and still maintaining that credibility?
I think first of all, and most importantly, is taking that deep breath and being able to say, I made the mistake. The
Mhm.
other thing that I would recommend is if someone else made that same mistake, how would you interact with them? What would that relationship be like? How would you behave? What were your expectations of them be? And then you have to transition that and have those same expectations of yourself. So then you go to your group and you say, I made this mistake, and here's what we're going to, what I'm going to do to correct it. Add an apology to it if necessary. But you want to set the example, as they say, lead by example, so that folks realize that you don't see yourself as being better than them, right? Or any different from them, that the expectations you have of them are the same ones you have of yourself. So setting, those expectations or demonstrating how are reacting and expecting correction and so forth. Treat yourself the same as you would treat them.
That's perfect. Yeah, I think even somebody, now that you mentioned that, somebody earlier wrote that comment about walking the talk.
Mhm.
You can talk the talk, but you got to walk the walk too.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, that's challenging.
mhm, very much
That whole
so.
idea of transparency and vulnerability, ooh, that will get you every time.
Right, absolutely. Well, Polly, we're at the end of the hour, and really, and as some of the messages are coming in, not only myself, but on behalf of Corporate College and the wonderful people on this webinar, we really want to thank you for your presentation today. It was really thought provoking. I can't wait to watch those videos as well. And so we apologize for the technical difficulty, but again, those video links will be embedded in the presentation that you receive. So please go ahead and take a look at those. And if you also would, just remember too, corporate college is still here. We're here to serve you with really essential learning to overcome all the challenges that you may be facing right now. And together with our virtual classroom trainings, our self-paced online programs, and our fabulous facilitators like Polly, we can really provide you with that organizational consultation services, training, and coaching, whether it's for a group or for you personally. Um, Please go ahead too and visit the corporate college website. You'll find our learnings are available, as I said, in a virtual classroom format, ranging on all topics. So we do not only the leadership type topics as Polly talked about today, but also our Lean Six Sigma, even into our healthcare programs with patient access specialists. And again, for groups, please feel free to give me a call or anybody here at the corporate college team, because we can arrange to put a tailored session together for you and take a deeper dive into some of these topics for you. And please feel free to rewatch and share today's presentation by visiting Corporate College free webinar series page in the next few days and clicking on the link in the left-hand side menu bar, the free webinar series link. And of course, you can always stay up to date with us by following us on social media. So thank you again. Thank you, Polly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And everyone, stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you.
Thank you.